1991 Rugby World Cup final. England against Wallabies from old Twickenham. Clearly a lot smaller than the current one. Under lockdown, this is the second of the Rugby World Cup finals which I have gone and watched. I watched the 87 one the other day. Did a review of it. I didn't live stream that one. But I did record myself watching the game. And I did live stream this one. The internet cut out halfway through, so there's two-part live stream for that one. Not surprisingly, with the lockdown, internet usage, at least here in New Zealand, has been at all-time highs. But yeah, I watched this with some of the guys in the live stream. England against the Wallabies ended up 12 points to 6, with the Wallabies getting their first Rugby World Cup title. So congratulations, belatedly, to the 991 Wallabies when I was still in single-digit age range. Yeah, a good win for them, 12 points to 6. A bit of a nail-biting finish. I would say maybe not the most nail-biting game. It had some moments which were, full of excitement, but a whole lot of kicking. And sometimes finals just go that way. That's one thing that hasn't changed about the game of rugby union. There are still times when in a final neither team wants to make a mistake and they just hoof the ball all day long, and that was kind of the case here. Still the case like the 87 game, where tries are 4 points. They still kick off from the ground rather than from a drop kick. They still don't jump at line out time, so there's still kind of a bunch of old rugby things going on. There was no yellow cards back in those days, even though there probably would have been one and a penalty try in this game if it were played today. But yeah, I watched the game, as I said, live streamed, and I don't think Australia were dominant for their victory, and maybe that's reflected in the fact that it was one score away from England being able to tie things up. They did get the only try of the game. Through Daly. I thought it was McKenzie at the time when I watched it, but apparently it was Daly according to the Rugby World Cup website. Either way, it was one of the front rowers from the Aussies. So, yeah, I guess in terms of deservedly getting the win, they scored the only try of the game. But if I was an England fan in 1991, I would be pretty upset at the number of lost opportunities. They kind of had the first real chance of the game attacking in the Aussie half. They knocked it on. They started with a lot more territory than the Aussies. It would have been kind of 60-70%. Although Australia did miss the first point of the game. Liner, I think it was 22 minutes. He missed, I think, his only kick of the game. Campese, I thought overall had a pretty quiet game, but he stood out for two moments. The first of which was what you kind of conjure up when you're thinking of a David Campese moment. He did a little chip and chase, and on another day, if the bounce of the ball had gone his way, he would have regathered that kick and gone over for the first try of the game, but he was unable to do so. The bounce was a bit cruel. He kind of lost it. So, yeah, that was kind of the first Aussie clear-cut chance. They did go ahead and score the first penalty of the game to make it 3-0. And then Australia got their try on 29 minutes through Daly. It was a line-out maul. They drove it over, and it was a great kick to convert it to make it 9-0. And that's kind of how it went into halftime. England had a key chance before halftime to attack again, and again, they knocked it on. I should mention their line-out especially was atrocious, similar to the 87 final where the All Blacks dominated the French line-out. The Aussies dominated the English line-out in this game. The throwing style is still kind of the old school one. As I said, they don't lift the jumpers, so I guess it is a bit tougher to get a set way of making sure you win that line-out ball. I would say back in those days before lifting, average line-out percentages were probably a bit lower in terms of success rates, but either way, Australia had the better of that. It was 9-0 at halftime. The halftime break was very short, and they didn't even go into the sheds. They just stood around on the pitch having a drink, probably an orange, and they cut to the odd ad. But yeah, they had a bit of a pep talk and then straight back into the game. So despite the fact that there were some things that were a bit tiresome, the kicking back and forth, the speed of the game was, again, like the 87 game, it was pleasant to watch. They didn't muck around at scrum time. Lineouts took a lot longer than the scrums. They took quite a while. And, I mean, just generally things were moving at a pretty quick pace. Some of the cynical stuff, though, definitely would have been eradicated or at least heavily penalised in the game. Now, some of the guys killing the ball, they just set a scrum. But, again, the scrum didn't take that long to set, so it wasn't a big deal. I should say also England missed 2 penalties in that first half and a drop goal in the early second half. So you look at the score and you look at those 9 points England missed from Jonathan Webb. He did not have his best day with the boot. The droppy he should have slotted, and at least one of the penalties was, I think, fairly easy. So, yeah, missing points out there for England as well. Very disappointing. They did kick one, though, to get themselves on the board to make it 9 points to 3, but then Australia got one back to make it 12-3. And then there was a moment where England had potentially their best chance of the game, maybe second best chance. It looked like they had a man over. They had the guys going down the left wing. Campese shot out the line, and when the guy was going to pass it to the now open man, Campese slapped that sucker down. He slapped it down, deliberate knock on all day long. I think probably today's game, they didn't do like a wide shot to show like the replay to see if there was a man covering, but potentially yellow card and penalty try in today's game. But in those days, just a penalty, which they did eventually kick to make it 6 points to 12. That was the way the score finished. They did have another fair few chances. Guscott was always pretty dangerous. There was one point where he made a break, he passed it to Carling, but the Australian defence just managed to hold. So it's not, I guess it was a case of the Aussie defence holding, sometimes a bit cynically for 1991. The English definitely not taking their chances with the boot, and just in terms of when they had men over or they had a chance to make a break, just not able to convert, knocking it on, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it was probably a bit of a disappointing one if you were an English fan back in 1991, because you're at home, you had the chances, and just couldn't convert. But there you go. It was Australia's first Rugby World Cup win. It was, as I said, a nail-biting finish because England had a chance to square it up, but they weren't able to get it done. So Aussie held at the finish, which was a good victory for them. And like when I looked at the lineups, like there's some seriously big names of Aussie rugby back in that lineup. Like, I mean, there was like Phil Kearns, everyone's favourite commentator, Ewan McKenzie, John Eales, Offa Ngawi was there, Far Jones, Liner, Campese, Tim Horan, Jason Little. So, I mean, David Nusafora, the coach, was on the bench. Like, a lot of these guys are now known for coaching. The English squad I wasn't quite as familiar with, but I guess being a Kiwi is probably not any huge shock. But, I mean, Brian Moore was there at hooker. He was probably not as on song as he would have liked with his line-out throwing. Will Carling, Rory Underwood. So lots of guys. Rob Andrew, heaps of guys who were all. Dean Richards is there on the bench. So yeah, Bob Dwyer was coach of the Wallabies. He went for a walk at one point during the game. I don't know where he went. If it was to the bathroom. There was guys smoking in the crowd, which again you saw in the '87 game. So times have changed a wee bit since then. But either way, Aussie will always bear that little World Cup emblem on their shoulder because they got that 1991 victory. So again, congrats to them. It was nice to see the fans come on the pitch at the end of the game, which is again something I remember doing as a child at Eden Park, but something that we don't really get to do anymore. So yeah, I'll have a look at some future games. I've looked at 87. I've looked at 91. The next one on my agenda is 1995. I think I will do a live stream of that, provided the internet in New Zealand holds firm, because the 1995 game I have only seen one time, and that was when it happened in 1995 as a little fella. My parents allowed me out of bed to watch that game, so that one should be a bit of a cracker. An interesting one to watch as an adult, rather than as a child when I probably didn't have as much of an idea as to what was going on. But yeah, interestingly, some of the guys in the live stream said this was the worst final ever. I can see kind of where they're coming from in terms of it being a bit stale at points. But again, it was, I guess, a traditional final where both teams are playing it fairly safe. And I did read some stuff saying that the Aussies kind of tricked the English into playing a more open game. And the English, when taking their chance, if they'd taken their chances, would have looked like a really expansive team. But by all accounts, they should have played it a bit tighter, if that's the right reports that I've been reading. But yeah, anyway, I guess the benefits of the lockdown, even though there's no rugby on, is that we get to see some of these classic games. If you haven't seen the live streams, again, I'll put them in the description or something like that. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts if you've seen this one, if you remember this one, if you went to this one, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I will catch you again soon. 1995 final, some point next week, I think. Anyway, take care, guys. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.